Hey everybody, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina at Fort Sumter National Monument, the cradle of the Civil War. Located in the large harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, Fort Sumter is a treasured national landmark. Visiting the fort requires a lengthy boat ride, but once you get there, the historic fort is like taking a step back in time. In 1860, Fort Sumter was a huge three-story fortification that dominated the entrance to Charleston Harbor. Named for a South Carolina Revolutionary War soldier, Thomas Sumter, the fort was designed to protect the city of Charleston from foreign attack, but by 1860, it was a domestic conflict that threatened it. On December 20th of that year, just a month after Abraham Lincoln was elected president, a convention in South Carolina declared that the federal government and the northern states had violated the Constitution and at the same time had denounced as sinful the institution of slavery. Feeling they could not continue to be part of a union in which the president had opinions hostile to slavery, the convention, made up of 90% slave owners, voted for South Carolina to secede from the Union. Federal government troops guarding Charleston Harbor soon retreated to Fort Sumter and ignored pleas to surrender the fort to local authorities. Then, in January of 1861, a supply ship named the Star of the West was fired upon when it attempted to resupply Fort Sumter. By February of 1861, 5 other southern states had joined South Carolina to form the Confederate States of America. The new Confederate military sent General Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard, who quickly strengthened Confederate positions in the area to challenge the Union soldiers inside Fort Sumter, including the use of a floating battery. After Lincoln's inauguration on March the 4th, the crisis in Charleston Harbor was national news. Neither side wanted to be seen as the aggressor, and Lincoln refused to negotiate with the Confederacy because, in his view, the Confederacy was not a legitimate government and South Carolina was still part of the United States. Meanwhile, supplies were getting dangerously low for the Union soldiers inside the fort. The fort's commander, Major Robert Anderson, refused to surrender to Confederate General Beauregard, who he had coincidentally previously taught as a student when he had been an instructor at the West Point Military Academy. In early April, President Lincoln ordered another supply ship to relieve the fort. Catching wind of this, the Confederate President, Jefferson Davis, ordered Beauregard to convince the Union forces to surrender before the supply ship arrived, or destroy the fort. Major Anderson once again refused to surrender. So, at 4:30 a.m. on April the 12th, 1861, the Civil War began when Confederate cannon opened fire on Fort Sumter. The next day, Major Anderson and his Union soldiers were forced to surrender. The fort itself was badly damaged, but remarkably, no men were killed in the bombardment. Major Anderson lowered the fort's American flag, and it quickly became a patriotic symbol throughout the North, even going on a tour of northern states to encourage the war effort. Just 2 years later, the Union came back to Charleston and attempted to retake Fort Sumter by force, but was defeated. After that, the Union pounded the fort on and off again for the next 2 years before Confederate forces finally abandoned the fort. At that time, nothing more than a pile of rubble. On April 14, 1865, 4 years after he had been forced to surrender, Major General Robert Anderson returned to the fort and once again raised the garrison flag, marking the end of the Civil War in Charleston. Today, the fort has been partially rebuilt and includes a large concrete building constructed to protect Charleston Harbor in the Spanish-American War. In 1948, Fort Sumter became a national monument and is currently visited by over 300,000 tourists a year. So come to Charleston and see Fort Sumter. It's one of the best places in America.